want you to imagine, just for a second, that you're walking into a room and a crime has just occurred in this room.
Okay.
The yellow tape is up, the air is perfectly still, and the evidence is just laid out right in front of you.
Right, the classic crime scene.
Exactly. There's like a broken lamp, maybe an open window, some shattered glass on the floor. Yeah, it feels entirely obvious what happened here.
It paints a picture.
Yeah, it paints a picture. But how do you know if that scene is actually telling you the truth? Or, and I think this is the really chilling part, what if that room has been, like, meticulously crafted to lie to you?
It is a terrifying thought, honestly, because you're basically walking into a three-dimensional illusion.
Right. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we have this really fascinating stack of sources in front of us and a very specific mission.
Yes, we do.
We are exploring the psychology, the hard science, and unfortunately, the tragic real-world consequences of deception at crime scenes.
It's a heavy topic, but so important.
It really is. Let's look at the heartbreaking case of Brianna Maitland.
Yeah.
I want to paint a picture for you so you really understand who we're talking about. Yeah. It's Friday, March 19th, 2004, in Montgomery, Vermont. Brianna is 17 years old.
Yeah.
And she lived a highly unique life.
She really did.
Her family lived entirely off the grid in the woods. They used solar power, and they even had a microturbine generating electricity from a stream near their house.
Wow.
But Brianna was a teenager. She craved a normal social life, friends, the things any 17-year-old wants.
Right.
So she had recently moved out and was piecing together an incredibly independent life for someone her age.
She was highly capable and driven. In fact, that very morning, she had just passed her GED test.
Yeah?
She was actively moving her life forward. She worked 2 jobs, one of them as a dishwasher at the Black Lantern Inn.
Which is this cozy bed and breakfast in a rural ski village.
Exactly. So she finished her shift, clocked out at 11:20 p.m., got into her car, and vanished into the night.
And the next afternoon, around 1:15 p.m., a Vermont state trooper is dispatched to a report of an abandoned vehicle along Route 118.
Right.
He finds Brianna's car, a 1985 pale green Oldsmobile Delta 88, and it is backed violently into an abandoned property called the Old Dutch Burn Barn.
And I really want you to visualize this scene, because it is screaming with the defects we just talked about.
Completely.
The car is lodged backwards so hard that it's physically hung up over the foundation of the house.
Yeah.
A piece of plywood from a boarded-up window has literally fallen onto the trunk of the car.
The front tires are cut hard left, and the doors are shut, but they're unlocked.
And then there's the physical evidence in and around the vehicle. Inside the car, sitting right there on the seat, are 2 uncashed paychecks with Brianna's name on them.
Her contact lenses are there.
Her prescription migraine medication is there.
Right. And outside on the ground, there is a broken necklace and some loose change.
When the FBI later looked at photographs of this, they noted that this scene looked definitively staged.
It was a simulation.
Exactly.
Right.
But the responding trooper, he didn't see a staged scene.
Honestly, he didn't even see a crime scene.
No.
He looked at a car hanging off a foundation and assumed it was just a drunk driver. Someone who took a notoriously dangerous curve too fast, backed into the house to try and turn around, got stuck, and ran away out of embarrassment to sober up.
We spent the first half of this discussion talking about the grand blunder that criminals make when they try to simulate a crime.
Right, due to cognitive load.
Yes. But in the Brianna Maitland investigation, the investigator made the grand blunder.
He completely ignored the defects of the situation.
He didn't put up crime tape. He didn't take comprehensive crime scene photographs.
He didn't even open the trunk of the car to see if a victim was inside.
No, he simply called a tow truck and had the car hauled away to a local garage.
It makes you want to pull your hair out.
It really does.
Because if you're listening to this and wondering how a police officer could miss something so blatantly obvious, you just have to look at the glaring incongruities. What runaway teenager leaves behind their uncashed paycheck?
Yeah.
And Brianna needed those contacts to see. You don't just run away into the dark woods without your vision.
Or your necessary medical prescription.
Right. And a broken necklace in the dirt. That strongly suggests a physical struggle, not a casual walk home.
This is where the psychological failure of the investigator really mirrors the psychological failure of the criminal.
Wow, yeah.
It perfectly exemplifies the core warning in Claire Ferguson's thesis, the severe danger of preconceived theories.
The bias.
Yeah. The trooper relied on a cognitive shortcut, what researchers call behavioral consistency assumptions.
Okay, what does that mean?
His brain offered an easy script. Well, teenagers drink, They drive too fast, they crash, and then they run away to avoid getting in trouble with their parents.
So because that theory was convenient and fit a common stereotype,
It completely blinded him to the screaming paradoxes right in front of him.
and because of that assumption, the absolute most critical window in any missing persons investigation, the first 48 hours, was completely lost.
Gone. Evidence was towed away. The scene was left unsecured.
And the most heartbreaking detail, Brianna's father, Bruce Maitland, wasn't even notified that his daughter's car had been found hanging off a barn.
That is just incomprehensible.
He found out days later when he went down to the police barracks to officially file a missing persons report. And the officer pulled out a Polaroid photograph of the towed car and casually asked, "Is this yours?"
You can only imagine the utter shock, the horror, and the immediate realization of incompetence that parent felt in that moment.
Oh, I can't even fathom it.
The physical evidence was entirely compromised by a lack of professional skepticism. And when the system fails to read the scene critically, the immense burden tragically falls on the victims' families.
They have to force the truth out into the light.
Exactly.
And Bruce Maitland fought back with a level of resilience that is hard to fathom. He essentially paused his entire existence to investigate his daughter's disappearance. He was going down to the inn, talking to her friends, putting up posters, retracing her route. And the state police initially pushed back hard against him.
Oh, they did.
At one point, Bruce was actually threatened with arrest for interfering with an active police investigation.
They threatened him because he was challenging their comfortable narrative.
Yeah.
But Bruce was relentless. He utilized media pressure to shine a massive, unavoidable spotlight on the case.
He forced the Vermont State Police to finally acknowledge that this wasn't some runaway teen situation.
Right. It was a complex, potentially staged scene indicating homicide or abduction.
And his pressure didn't just change the trajectory of Brianna's investigation. It forced massive, permanent, systemic changes across the entire state.
Yeah, that's true.
Because of the glaring errors made at the old Dutch Burn barn, the Vermont State Police completely overhauled how they operate. They created a dedicated major crimes unit so that rural barracks wouldn't be left handling complex, potentially staged scenes alone.
That's huge.
They finally adopted the Amber Alert system, and they instituted a strict, unbreakable rule. Law enforcement in Vermont will never again return vehicles to families in open missing persons cases.
They must be preserved indefinitely for future DNA testing.
Right.
Bruce took an unimaginable grief and forged it into systemic action. He even founded a nonprofit organization called Private Investigations for the Missing.
Wow.
It provides free, private investigator services to families who are hitting the exact same investigative brick walls, the same biases and assumptions that he did.
That's incredible.
He recognized that when the initial responders fail to see the defects of the situation, families desperately need specialized advocates who are trained to not ignore those incongruities.
And while Brianna has never been found, there's a small sliver of scientific momentum now.
There is, yeah.
Thanks to crowdfunding and support from the true crime community, full genome sequencing by a specialized lab called Othram is fully funded for the DNA evidence found in Brianna's case.
We don't know yet if it will lead to an identity,
Right.
but the hard science is finally, decades later, being applied to whatever evidence survived that initial blunder.
It is a hopeful step forward. But the initial failure to read Brianna's car, critically, remains a haunting reminder of what Dr. Hans Gross warned us about over a century ago.
Yeah, he wrote, "Circumstances cannot lie, witnesses can and do."
The car hanging off the foundation, the paychecks left on the seat, the broken necklace in the dirt. Those circumstances were screaming the truth into the dark that night.
But human bias drowned them out.
So we've gone on quite a journey today.
We really have.
From the biological imperative of chimpanzees hiding their tracks to secure a meal, to the subtle and often clumsy architecture of a killer trying to simulate a burglary.
Right.
All the way to the tragic, frustrating mishandling of Brianna Maitland's car. The through line here is clear. Identifying deception requires us to fiercely ignore what our brains expect to see.
And instead relentlessly interrogate what is actually in front of us.
Exactly.
And I think that leaves us with a final, really provocative thought for everyone listening to consider.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've spent this time talking about physical crime scenes, blood, broken glass, abandoned cars, masking and decoying.
Yeah.
But our world is fundamentally shifting. As our lives move almost entirely online, what happens when the scene of the crime is entirely virtual?
Oh, interesting.
Are the new staged crime scenes our digital footprints? Social media profiles curated to show a completely false reality of mental health?
Wow.
Data logs and location pings manipulated to provide an alibi.
Oh, wow. The digital dissimulation.
Exactly.
The idea of repackaging or mimicking someone's entire digital life.
Precisely. If the physical defects of the situation are what give away a staged physical crime, how does that apply to a digitally staged life?
Right.
What is the digital equivalent of an uncashed paycheck left on a car seat? And more importantly, as we move into an era of deepfakes and digital manipulation, who are the detectives trained to spot the defects in our virtual realities before it's too late?
That is definitely something for all of us to mull over the next time we log on and accept what we see at face value.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of deception. Remember, the world is full of simulations. Keep your eyes open, ignore the obvious, and always question the defects of the situation. Catch you next time.